This is Mike with AskTractorMike.com. The grass is growing, it's time to go to the pasture and slick things up. You want to take your rotary cutter, hook it on, and go knock down some brush. Well, there's a few things you need to do before you go to the field. And I like to do these at least once a year when I haven't used the machine and the weeds are growing up around it. Now, I'm going to give you a list today of 10 things to do with your rotary cutter before you use it. I don't want you to ignore this, your owner's manual. Do everything that's in the owner's manual. There may be some things that's not on my list that's in here from a maintenance and a safety standpoint that are important, but these 10 will get you started today, and I like to do these every year. Let's get started. First thing we're going to check today is our gearbox oil. Now, checking gearbox oil can be one of three ways. It can either be a sight plug where you just look to see if you can see oil through it. It can be a check plug where you take a plug out and you pour oil in until it runs out and then put the plug back and you're good. Or my favorite is this one, and that's a dipstick, where you just pull the dipstick out. You don't need any tools to get into it, and you can see where your oil level is. We want just the right amount of oil. Too little is bad, too much is bad, and we want to check the color of the oil. Any milky look or any off color means we have water in there and it needs to be drained and replaced. Okay, the second thing we're going to do is grease everything. And grease is the lifeblood of a machine like this. We're going to grease everything on the power takeoff, and there's some zerks that are really difficult to get to on the power takeoff shafts that need to be greased often. In fact, I recommend you grease them every time you use it. There's also some grease zerks in the plastic shielding that goes on, and a lot of people miss these, but they need grease. There's also the tail wheel, and the tail wheel turns and flops around a lot on one of these machines, and they need to be filled with grease. Next thing we're going to do, we're going to hook the machine up to the tractor, pick it up, and move it. And a couple of reasons for doing this. First off, there could be an animal living underneath it, depending on the time of year it is. And if you leave it right there and kick it in gear and there's a family of raccoons or cats or anything, you may not like cats or raccoons, but that's a pretty awful way for them to go. And that's happened before. So we're going to pick it up and move it to a different location. Also, after you moved it, look and make sure if there's not any brown grass underneath it, because brown grass, dead grass caused by the shade of the machine is one thing, but brown grass caused by an oil leak is another thing. If there's any oil leak in your gearbox, you want to know about that right now. And if you had to add oil to the gearbox, look for the grass color underneath it. The brown grass could indicate you have a seal failing under there and you need to take care of that. So we're going to move it to a different location. Now I'm going to move it up to a flat, level place like my driveway. Now, the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to block it up. I'm going to put a block underneath it or jack stands, and I'm going to look at the blades underneath it. First off, the blade pan. I want to make sure the blade pan is tight. If there's a wobble in that blade pan, either there's a big nut on the bottom of it that's not tight, or I have a gearbox seal failing. That's bad. We want to take care of that. I want to really look at that underneath that blade pan to make sure there's no twine or net wrap wrapped up in there. If you brush hog for a neighbor that doesn't pick up their net wrap, they feed round bales in the field and they just leave the net wrap laying, that can get wrapped up under there, and that's one of the main reasons that seals in the bottom of those gearboxes fail. If that net wrap or twine gets up around that gearbox, it can suck that seal out of there pretty quick, and you're ending up buying a whole gearbox, and we don't want you to do that. It's really expensive. Next thing we're going to do is take a really good look at our blades. We want to make sure our blades are not worn to the point that they're getting really, really dull and they won't do a good job of cutting. And we also want to make sure there's not a blade tucked up under the machine. If you kick in your machine anytime and there's a massive, massive vibration, one of those blades, and they're designed to swivel, has gotten chucked up underneath the stump jumper and it's not extended. If one of your blades should happen to be up there, and this usually happens after you've hit something, if one of those blades is tucked up underneath the blade carrier, then you need to get a pry bar and get it untucked. That's normally what happens there. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is check all the bolts on the machine for torque. And the ones you want to look at, the easy ones, are the bolts that hold the gearbox onto the main frame. You might want to check your brackets and make sure they're tight. The big ones are the bolts that hold the blades on, and the bolts that hold the blade pan on. And they are on the blades. They take 350 foot-pounds of torque on this machine, and the bolt that holds the big nut that holds the blade pan on takes 400 foot-pounds of torque to make sure it's tight. So you're going to need about a $500 torque wrench and 3 buddies and about a 10-foot long cheater bar. Good luck. The next thing we're going to check is our slip clutch, if the machine is so equipped. And slip clutches need to be burned in once a year to make sure they function. I've got a separate video, I'll put a link in below, that explains how to do that. If we don't have a slip clutch, we have shear bolts. And shear bolts you don't have to do a thing about. They're there to protect you if you need it, but you need to make sure at this point you have extra shear bolts in your toolbox in case you blow one out in the field. All right, the next thing we're going to do is get a level and check and make sure our machine is level left and right, from side to side. And then from forward to reverse, we want a slight downward angle. We want it to be a little lower in the front, not much, a little lower in the front than the back. And here's why. If it's lower in the back, you're going to cut the material and then not throw it out and cut it again. That makes a pretty mulched look. It may make a better, prettier cut, but it's going to take a lot of horsepower and it's going to continually cut that material up. If you have it tilted slightly forward, and on this machine they recommend 3/4 of an inch from the back of the machine to the front of the machine tilted forward, it's going to try to expel the material out the back and not take tractor horsepower doing so. And the last thing we're going to do is check our height, the height of the machine. Now the blades don't go clear to the bottom of the side of the machine. On this particular machine, the blades are an inch above where the bottom of the deck is. So if we want to cut at, say, 4 inches, we're going to set the bottom of our deck 3 inches off the ground. And once we measure that and set it, there's usually a stop on a tractor on your 3-point that stops the travel of the lever. We're going to move that stop up to our 3-point up and down lever, and we're going to set that. Usually there's a stop there, and we're going to set that so we can raise the machine and then lower it back to the height that we want to cut at. Google and YouTube don't want you to quit watching videos right now, so keep watching videos. But when you're tired of watching videos, if you want a copy of this check sheet, it's 10 items to check before using a rotary cutter. You can go to my website, asktractormike.com, and download a free copy of this list. I survive on web traffic. I appreciate you watching my videos, and I'd be honored if you'd subscribe to my YouTube channel and like my Facebook page and share this video with other tractor enthusiasts. And if you have questions or comments, put them below. I'll try to answer them. Thanks for watching.